All right, we had a fabulous lunch and now we're ready, right? A day in the life of transitioning to a managed services provider. I have to tell you something. There is no day in the life. It's more around a little chaos, I like to say. There's never a dull moment. And you might be sitting there thinking, why do I care? I'm here to talk a little bit more about mobile and where my company's going from that perspective. But I'll tell you, and Maribel just said it, you have to think about the organization, the team, how you're going to get work done. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the journey at Cargill in us moving to a managed services provider and how it's really enabled our ability to think more as a strategic partner with our business partners, earning a voice at the table, and really making a difference. So with that, I'm looking for my clicker that I don't see. Or maybe, can you just advance the slide for me back there? Perfect. So Cargill. How many have not heard of Cargill? It's okay, raise your hands. Cargill's one of the largest privately held companies in the world. We have about 155,000 employees. We're globally based in over 70 countries, about $120 billion in revenue last year. And many of us think of Cargill that do know of us as an agricultural company. And that's definitely where we got our roots. But we're also a financial services trading company. We have a large supply chain. We do a lot of other things outside of just that agricultural roots. And so let me give you a couple tidbits of facts just to resonate that. 1 in 3 salmon, thank you, Spencer. 1 in 3 salmon in the world are fed by Cargill. Yeah, so if you just think of that the next time you eat one. At any given time in the world's waterways, there's 600 vessels that are run by Cargill. 185 million tons of commodities run through our supply chain in a given year. My favorite is at any given point, over 20% of the world's food source is running through Cargill's supply chain. Just gives you a little bit of perspective. If you're a McDonald's consumer and you're happy that now we have all-day breakfast in North America, you'll be happy to know that all eggs served at those McDonald's run through Cargill's supply chain as well. So just a little fun facts for you. So why do I tell you that? Because it helps put a little context to what that means from an IT perspective. And so I have accountability for running infrastructure operations at Cargill and enterprise architecture. And when you start to extrapolate out serving those 70 countries in 60-plus languages, what that means from an IT perspective is it's kind of big. And what happens in a company like Cargill is we grow a lot through acquisition and merger, and with that comes a lot of additional complexities to our environment. We have 60 different companies that run within the umbrella of Cargill that really are running on their own infrastructure, things like that. And so I paint this because what happened is we kind of accidentally architected over time. We didn't really have a location strategy. We didn't have a central way to govern our services or our processes. And it was really hard to scale staff when we were going through mergers, for example, or we were divesting. We didn't really have a talent strategy around how we were running our operations, and it got really complex. And it was costly. As you know, to run an organization at anybody, we're always looking at the bottom line run rate, and it was costly for us in this infrastructure arena. And so really, it was a call to action, and so we made a decision to move to a managed services provider. And let me just double click real quick on the complexities. Let's use help desk, because a lot of you have help desk functions that you are either using as a customer or you have supported them, but we were running our help desks across the globe in many different ways. So this might resonate. So if you know Alex and Alex can fix your printer the last time you need it, you're going to just tap Alex on the shoulder the next time you need your printer fixed or something you needed fixed. And so a lot of times we weren't even calling a help desk. We didn't track tickets. We had no sense of how many incidents we were trying to serve. And so just extrapolate that out across all different domains within infrastructure, and you can start to see the complexities and why it was so evident to us that we had to get our arms around this operation a little bit more. So these chevrons probably look familiar to you. You've gone through an RFI, RFP, vendor selection process before. We do it every single day. This one was a little bit tricky. We started with 10 to 15 different vendors when we started to go on the search of who we wanted to partner with. And in the end, we down-selected at the point we got to joint selection design to 3 vendors. And we spent 3 weeks with these vendors walking through how we're going to serve, what were their services, where was their talent. And ultimately, it came down to a couple things, and cost wasn't the only play. And I think that's really important, because if you're thinking about going to a managed services provider, I would suggest you don't just go with a low-cost provider. But for us, it came down to who was going to really drive a higher standard of work in our services, in our delivery, but who ultimately really took the time to get to know us better during that joint solution design sessions. And so we ended up picking the partner we felt was really committed to us in really wanting to merge those cultures and becoming one global team. And so it sounds minimal, it sounds trivial, but I will tell you that it has made all the difference in the world, because in our transition, which we signed contract March of 2014, 9 months later, we were up and running across the globe with most end-to-end services from an infrastructure perspective. And so my advice is rip the Band-Aid off and go. If you're going to go and go fast. But be thoughtful in trying to transition some of those end-facing services last. And so you really tried to stagger out. So what we did is we would go by domain. So let's take help desk. We'd roll help desk by region, and we would go across the globe to get it all up and running. And so there's a lot of lessons here, and I know we're not here just to talk about the lessons learned from the transition process, but be thoughtful about it. We got a lot of people who are going to be a part of the end state organization involved to help design how it would work. And let me throw you a few numbers out there. This was, I'm going to round up, 1,000-person organization. We swapped out 700 people in that 9 months. The legacy retained Cargill team is 10% of the end state team. The industry runs at 80-20. We push the envelope, and we're running at 10% in that end state team. And so you talk about the volume of change, trying to keep people motivated when they knew their jobs might be going away. We were transparent, we were deliberate with messaging and communication and bringing people along the way. But it was hard. It was hard, so the faster you go, the more transparent you can be as leaders in moving to this environment. It really goes a long way in ensuring that people kind of stay the course through the transition and ultimately are able to knowledge transfer, because so much of what you had to rely on as people who were losing jobs also had to share what they knew, right? They had to document how they did their jobs. And so really kind of working through that environment in a compacted time frame, being sensitive to what was going on was really critical. A few lessons learned. It was really important during the transition that you had leaders that were going to be part of the end state team accountable for making some of those changes happen. And so we really worked at one team. Again, our resources sit in 70 countries. We're running a help desk in 23 languages. It's complex, and so really having kind of that longevity of people through transition into end state was important. And one thing that I would say is probably the biggest lesson is you have to expect some sort of performance dip. Your services aren't going to maintain the same level of quality through the transition, but you have to really get your business partners on board with that. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I'll take personal accountability for, is we did not do a really good job of keeping people engaged with understanding that dip, or that Alex wasn't going to be there anymore, and you weren't going to be able to tap him on the shoulder anymore, and you were going to have to actually enter a ticket by calling a help desk or entering a form online. So don't underestimate, no matter what you're doing here. You all have so many different roles. You're driving mobile strategies, you're trying to get your business partners convinced on what to do with the cloud or not, and so much at the root of successful whether it's transformation or implementations of major technology initiatives, to me, comes down to your company's culture and being ready to be driving towards that next thing. So spend time on the change management aspects of whatever you're doing. For us, again, 1,000 people, big change to the organization. I was in role, I've been at Cargill 2 years, and not quite 2 years, and I was 6 weeks in role when the CEO stopped me in the hallway and said, Kim, how's that managed services transition going? I was shocked. I'm the CEO of one of the largest privately held companies in the world is stopping me, asking me how the IT infrastructure is going, which I always think is kind of the back door behind the scenes stuff that not a lot of people pay attention to, especially the CEO of the company. But it's those pivotal moments that I needed to give. Hey, DMAC, I need your support on the cultural changes that this is going to invoke. And take advantage of those opportunities that you have when you're driving the changes that you want to have in the organization. Huge lessons learned for me. Kind of the new organization, really, I mentioned this already, we staffed lean, we're 1/10 of the previous size, but what those 150 people, what those people do is what's really important. Because now, they're the ones setting the strategy. They're the ones deciding, what's our cloud-first mentality, Kim? What's that gonna look like? What's the infrastructure of the future? Because I can tell you today, it's not gonna be having 12 global data centers and continue to expand in a way that we have historically. The world around us is changing, and I need that Cargill badge team to have the strategic point of view, to trust the managed services provider. They're providing the day-to-day support. They're running the operations. God, it's taken us a while to get to green, but we're green. So now let the team focus on what's next. At Cargill, we say sometimes, we have about 285,000 connected devices. In 3 to 5 years, I'm going to be 3 to 5x that. So what is the future of infrastructure for Cargill? It's not the way it's working today. And so now finally, I'm allowing and enabling a team to be empowered to make decisions, to play in a sandbox environment, test new technologies, be more innovative because we trust our managed services provider is running the day-to-day operations. And don't get me wrong, we leverage them too for innovation. We want to hear what they have to say. Contractually, this contract's 500 pages long. You could gladly, I'd love to talk to you about that someday too, but they're complex, but we built in clauses around how do they drive innovation for us too. So we're putting a lot of automation in processes, again, continuing to get touches of hands and out of the process so we can drive through more technology. But that's what this has enabled for us. Getting your ducks in the row, governing against the services you have, making sure you have good SLA and metrics and reporting, but now thinking about what's next. Because I'll tell you, if I keep running Cargill the way we've run it the last 25 years and we continue to accidentally architect, I'm not going to have a chance to keep up with what's next. I'm not going to have a chance to know what cloud environment somebody is standing up because my business partner met somebody at a conference they were at and are standing up, bought something that signed a contract without us being involved in it. So now, back to that cultural change, I've earned that voice at the table. I've earned that ability to say, hey, I'm driving $50 million of savings in the IT budget because I moved to this managed services agreement. Let's talk about what we can do with that return on investment. Let's talk about the future of what's next. A few steady states. So now we've been up and running over a year and a half, we're a year and a half since go live date. A couple things, you're never done. So, while you might think you have this transition plan, you're gonna move from A to point B, C, D, whatever it is, you're never done. You always are looking to continually optimize. You're always looking for that next thing. How do I get better? How do I get more innovative? How do I drive more strategy to the organization? How do I continue to reduce my run rates? So focus on stabilizing, focus on the areas that you can control. We're having some issues still to this day, a year and a half later. I still don't have my project throughput and my life cycle throughput to the place where I need it to be. So I'm focusing there, I'm putting improvement plans around those areas. The contract itself is quite complex, so don't underestimate what you need to have around managing just the contractual components of that. But in the end, I stand here today, this was the right thing to do for Cargill. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do for every company. I think infrastructure and operations tends to be a place because of the commoditized nature of the work. It's a natural place for us to want to go and dabble into managed services. My advice is kind of go big or go home. Take it for what it's worth. But I get a lot from my third party, my managed services provider, because of the scale I have in terms of the agreement. And so there's a commitment from us to them that really wants them to invest in whatever's next for me too. So I see companies, my prior experience in retail and even financial services, I've seen companies where you maybe you'll take one component or one domain of a certain area, and I just haven't seen that be as successful. And so that running at 90-10, that 90% is kind of their operation to run, including some of the innovation aspects that we ask them to drive, really has made a difference. So with that, I will just say, looking ahead, really it was the right choice for us. Continue to focus on the change management aspects of whatever's next for you. Mobile and digital, it's fine. I'm laughing. I was just talking at lunch. I was asked last week to become the head of digitization for the company too. And I said, well, let's define digitization, because that's a broad word. But if anything, to me, it's around, there is an ever pressing need for us as IT technologists to understand where our business is going and how do we marry technology enablement through revenue driving business process improvement opportunities. And so I think now I'm very confident sitting in the chair that I do today that the organization around infrastructure operations and architecture is in a place where we are going to be able to move more nimbly, be more agile, and make better decisions as a result of our change. So with that, I don't know how much time we have left, maybe a couple minutes if there's questions, but I'll be here throughout the rest of the day and evening if there's things that people have questions on.
I'm coming. Deepak. Excuse me.
I'm sorry, what's that? Oh, you'll wait for the mic. It's hard to see you, I got this bright light in my face, so I'm not trying to act like I was ignoring you. I just was trying to do this.
I wasn't about to leave you standing there by yourself. Just from an audit perspective, maybe talk a little bit more about how do you kind of audit what the MSP is doing, and how do you kind of stay on top of it? And from a resource perspective internally, who have you allocated to kind of hold them accountable for their actions?
That's a great question. So I made it sound easy. Spend time doing it, but it's a big job. So we work with our supplier governance teams, who are kind of our VMO or vendor management office, and there are definitely relationship review board meetings we have on a quarterly basis. We have top-to-top executive meetings every 6 months. So there's a cadence of just time together, but we formally kind of audit and review things on a monthly basis. We have daily metrics that are tracking progress around our KPIs and SLAs. But we found we had to dedicate a full person that's not part of the vendor management office, that's actually on my quality team, that's really just accountable for that. And so day-to-day issue escalation, things aren't getting done, we have a go-to person that's managing and watching that. Again, the contract, partly the nature of our company and the size, we have a lot of contractual issues per country. I have employment labor issues in different parts of the world that are just causing a need for attention. So that might not be the case given your company and kind of the scale. But I found I wanted a little bit more line of sight to what that team was doing. So I put in place a quality team that's running all that operational metrics, that are pulling things from all the different teams. But then I have a dedicated person that's, if I have anything contractually questioned, I know I have that go-to person within my own org that I can go to. So that's worked for us for now. And we're, again, a year and a half in.
Any insights on the considerations for mobile and apps to move the business forward?
So it's consideration for mobile and apps to move the business forward. So that's a broad question. The easy answer is yes. I think in the apps world in particular, they're looking right now in parallel to what we've done. What can they do from a managed services agreement? What do they have to do to get their org ready? And then I will tell you, Cargill, it grew through acquisition. And again, I use this word accidentally architected, but we haven't had a real robust plan around, what is our mobile strategy? We haven't had a strong enterprise architecture voice at the table that's really driving, hey, here is what the industry is doing. Here is our standard development platform, and we're not really great at governing against that. So I recently took on EA as an accountability in the last 6 months, and those are the things we're starting to try to drive. So I would say, everybody would say we have a mobile strategy. The problem is there's 20 different mobile strategies. So we don't have a consolidated plan that I would say is kind of that enterprise roadmap for those pieces. But now we're starting to get that in place. I have a 2 to 3 year roadmap now for infrastructure. Now I'm coupling the application layers on top of that so that I can say, hey, here for all of IT is kind of our 2 to 3 year roadmap, and here's where we're going to play to win and invest in different mobile platforms, for example.
I can imagine you got the buy-in from the business leadership in terms of the transition that you were undertaking. What was the feedback you got from the end user community? Basically, I could imagine there was a lot of IT sucks because of the changes that they were now dealing with.
Were you visiting Cargill last year? Well, no, just kidding. I'm laughing because I joked often, and I went on public saying, I said this a lot in public forums, I felt often I was wearing a bulletproof vest as we went through that transition because there was a lot of unhappy customers. And that's what I didn't manage well. That's what I didn't get ahead of, because even if service was good, or better, it didn't feel that way, because to some people they had to make a phone call that they never had to make before. To some people, Alex that they had known for 20 years was gone, and they didn't really understand where Alex went and the kind of whys behind that. And so the reputation of IT and the performance dip was our services from overall red, green, yellow weren't quite as good for a 6-8 month period. Different pockets of that got to green quicker. But we didn't do a good job of managing those expectations. And in a heavy relationship, consensus-driven company, that's really hard, especially when your end users sit in 70 different countries. And for me personally, to get to every site where we were going to make changes, it was impossible to do. So the good news is we went on a marketing campaign. So as we started to get out of that kind of performance dip and things were going better and we were tracking against the business case, we would talk about the savings we were driving to our end users and how they could reinvest those dollars in different things. And so we started to get some wind behind our sails, and that's really allowed us now to be brought in. The fact that if you would ask me a year ago if I was going to be asked by our CEO to be the digital person representative from IT, I don't think people would have thought that made sense, because we hadn't earned the right to have those conversations yet. But so you have to sell, you have to listen, you have to be empathetic to the changes around you, and really read kind of that body language and be ready to take some hits. I mean, like I said, there were times where things didn't go well, and you have to face up to that and be transparent and acknowledge it. So, okay, last question. I'm going to get pulled off stage, but I'll happily answer more later tonight.
Okay, so this will be it's sort of two-part but quick. So first, user experience, is that going to be falling into your area of work? And second, climate change has a huge impact on Cargill's global business, and how do mobility and IoT play to the business's ability to adapt to major climate changes across the supply chain?
Yeah, so user experience is definitely something that I would umbrella under enterprise architecture's kind of accountability to set standards against. And you're right, climate is something that impacts us every single day. And in a lot of ways, not just because we have farmers growing crops that we want to sell their crops for them or use their product for, but also because we do a lot of trading, and we do a lot of hedge funding against things, and we need to know the latest and greatest information. So to me, I come from a retail sector where it's very intuitive that mobility is right here and now, and the consumers in stores have access to information at the point of purchase that really requires you to work different. The same thing applies in agricultural and financial services. We've got to do a better job of getting that data real time out on remote sites. And in Indonesia, where I have plants that might take 4 hours to get to by boat, I've got to be able to reach those end users or those Cargill employees that are selling out at those locations. And so today, while we have they have some of the devices, the connectivity's not great, so we have to go through major network upgrades and WAN projects from an infrastructure perspective, but we've got to get access more real time to people, and that's really what the focus is now. So I could talk a long time about that 10% of that team, that 100-person team now that's really driving some of those strategies, but we are having those conversations now, and I guarantee you if we hadn't moved to managed services, we wouldn't be having them the way we are today. So I'm really optimistic and hopeful that we can really turn information into revenue, and that's going to be done through our ongoing focus on mobility.